Bonjour everyone, I am Anne-Lise Cailliez and welcome to Parlez-Vous CEO, where we ditch the corporate talk and get real about entrepreneurship. Each week, I chat with founders and CEOs who build businesses their way, through the failures, pivots, and breakthroughs. And they bring the fire. Plus, I'll drop some golden nuggets of wisdom from my own entrepreneurial journey. This is your space to grow, learn, and evolve with a true growth mindset. Remember, success isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Now let's kick things off and get this party started. Hello, bonjour, bonjour, hello. Welcome to another episode of Parlez-Vous CEO. My name is Anne-Lise Cailliez and I am your host. And for those who have just joined the podcast, Anne-Lise Marketing Partners, we specialize in helping female-led businesses scale their revenue. If you want to learn how to take your business to the next level, make sure to stick around. And if you're interested in a free growth consultation, just drop the word in the DMs. All right. So we have a super exciting guest today, and I'm so pumped to have with me Kathryn Walker, or Katie. So Katie is the CEO of Revitalist Lifestyle and Wellness, a publicly traded mental health company pioneering psychedelics medicine, particularly ketamine therapy. And she's also a former anesthesiologist who transitioned from trauma center nursing to finding a cutting edge mental health company. So Katie, in your own words, would you introduce yourself and a little bit about your story and your background?
Yeah, for sure. So my background, I have 3 degrees. I come more so from a nursing aspect, but I have my degrees in anesthesia as well as psychiatry. And I worked in the hospital system from 2003 until 2018 and really understood the inpatient space. And that's a world of its own. In 2018, my daughter was actually 8 years old at the time. And my hours at the hospital were consistently inconsistent. So I kind of got motivated to open the clinic, which became the company Revitalist in 2018. And now I've been in the outpatient space since 2018. And it's been really interesting to see this. But a lot of the things that I learned in the hospital or I saw in the hospital, I've kind of gotten to the point to where I really want to break that mold in the outpatient space. In the hospital system, we forget, right? We just forget that people have feelings. We forget that trauma exists. And we just think that every day is a day, right? We all die sometime, and we just don't have a lot of empathy towards that sometimes. So now that's really all I deal with a lot is mental health and pain and ketamine therapies, looking at psychedelics and all those different aspects. But really my company now is, yes, we're all about helping people to live a higher quality of life, but really we're trying to help people to kind of bridge the gap. And that's one of my things that I'm probably most passionate about now is why don't we have medicines out there that actually work extremely well? Why does everything cost so much? Why do people not know who to call? And it's such a system that takes advantage of so many people. And unless you understand the language, you succumb to that system. So I feel like I'm becoming to a point. It's like, I understand the language. I understand the business. I understand mental health. I understand all these different aspects. I understand insurance in the United States. And if anybody has worked in that sector, ridiculous. Do I think they're full of criminals? You would have to rationalize to me why they aren't. And, so there's so many different pieces there. And I think that this whole crisis, the whole mental health crisis that we're all trying to help, it's the biggest players in the system that are also creating it. So I see this like disconnect. And that's kind of where I'm at now is like, I love helping people. I really, really do. But this is so much bigger than just helping people. This is like trying to get systems that aren't trying to cover up everything. We're trying to get people the care that they not only deserve, but the care that they pay for. Like if you think about insurance, right? You're paying for insurance. It's mandated on a state level and a federal level to have insurance. Yet they tell you, no, you can't do this. So there's a lot of different aspects out there that are just constantly fueling me to keep going through this, even though, there's a lot of days it's just like, can I do all this? And you just keep going and you figure it out along the way, expanding your CV all the time.
Absolutely. And Katie, was there a moment when you really realized that traditional approaches weren't enough and you needed to chart a completely different path?
Yeah. I mean, I think my biggest piece, right, when I started reading about ketamine therapies, in anesthesia in the hospital, we did use ketamine. But then when I came out of the hospital, I mean, the data's there for ketamine. there's probably more data on ketamine than there is any other pharmaceutical drug that's out there that's actually covered by insurance. The issue with that is there's no big payers lobbying for this drug with insurance companies. So I think when I started noticing, because I was pretty much unaware of mental health. And now that I've gotten outside the anesthesia space, anesthesia, we're about 99.8% effective. We're like one of the safest, most effective specialties in the world of all careers. We are so effective. And then when you get out to the outpatient space and you see mental health on average is about 30% effective. Well, then you start reading about placebo, and placebo a lot of times is like 22 to 34% effective. So you start reading about these things and you're like, wait a minute, are we actually doing anything? Or are we actually making things worse? In my honest opinion, with mental health, I personally believe the system's making it worse. You know, you'll see people who have like 80% of incorrect diagnoses. You see medications out there that are only 30 to 50% effective that actually have a competitive rate with a placebo. So you see all these things and you're just like, why do we not see it? And we don't see it because we're not, I mean, I'm in it. I'm in the middle of this fire kind of stuff, and I see it. And, you know, and it's trust. Like healthcare, you're supposed to trust your providers and your nurses and anybody in healthcare because it's such an ethically protected field. And it's not the providers necessarily that you can't trust. It's the people that are feeding them the information and the education that they need. So, you know, and not to go down too many rabbit holes, but, you know, when I was I think I went to school for about 11 years between anesthesia and psychiatry, nursing, all that. And, or after high school. And I didn't know that the books that were taught on in medicine, so medical schools, nursing schools, those books are funded by pharmaceutical companies, right? So, and then a lot of the data when we have reps who come in and train us on different pieces of medications and things like that, the reps are not pharmacology reps. These are people who have a bachelor's in sales. So they're selling you all of these different pieces. So I think that's where I get so frustrated is you see people who are very vulnerable, who are trusting you. And that's us, right? I mean, like we sign like the Hippocratic Oath, right? That we are going to do everything in our will to protect these people. But we're not trusting the system. We are trusting the system behind us, but the system behind us is all revenue producing. And I guess that's where I get very frustrated because I get it. I get it about revenue. I promise. I get it about revenue. But why do we feel like we can't actually help people heal? Because when people are better, they contribute more to the economy. We don't have to pay as much. So it's more of a system probably of control than revenue. But from that standpoint, there's just so much out there that we don't know. And I'm sure, especially with all the things, I don't know if you're keeping up with this, but like with the RFK aspects, who's talking now about, like, there's going to be data coming out about the COVID vaccine and data coming out about Tylenol and autism with pregnant moms and all these different pieces, right? And I don't know what the data is going to show, but that's going to instill a lot of fear into people. And, you know, so if you instill fear, does that make society worse because they're actually learning the truth, or are they trying to hide the truth from us to protect us from the overall picture? I don't know. But it is really, really interesting to me. And I wish that there were good people out there who said, yeah, we're going to make revenue because we have a good business that brings a lot of value to a lot of people. And right now, I feel like the system is only making money off of betrayal of trust on others, if that makes sense. And trying not to be a conspiracy theorist here.
That's amazing what you're sharing. What you're sharing is mind blowing. You're describing about the books were made by pharmacies. It's is that something in the US, or do you think that's something international? I'm asking because my parents, my sisters, all my family, all doctors. Is that something American, or is it something international?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I would expect it's international if the laws actually allow them to do that. So the difference in the United States, right? In the United States, we can advertise. So if you look at and this is really interesting. I don't know the specific data on this, but basically with the United States, we consume about 98% of all pharmaceutical drugs in the United States versus the world. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in the United States, you can advertise for drugs. So all these big pharmaceutical companies are advertising, you know, to sell their drugs. A lot of the other countries actually don't allow that, which I don't disagree with. So that would be That would be the only thing I would question is in the other countries, do they actually allow people who are going to make money off of you? Do they also allow them to build your textbooks? Because like when I got my psychiatry degree, that's all I felt like they were trying to teach me. And of course, I was already in the ketamine and psychedelic space, but they were only trying to teach me, here's the drugs you push, here's the drugs you push, here's the drugs you push. That was it, right? With psychiatry. And I'm such a big believer in you've got to improve your emotional intelligence if you want to decrease stress, decrease inflammation, improve your quality of life. The mental health sector, I mean, some of us that are advanced in mental health, we talk about emotional intelligence. We talk about meditation or, mindfulness. Those terms are still taboo to a point. And that's, that's kind of the interesting piece of everything is I feel like the wool's kind of been pulled over our eyes. I think we really don't understand the brain nearly as well as we should. And I always like to tell people, like with mental health, we just need to close the book, admit failure, and move on. And look at it. I mean, I love looking at the brain more through the lens of, or the mental health through the lens of the brain. It's like, how's the brain not acting correctly? Not, oh, we got to figure out what your diagnosis is so we can get you on the right medicines. Because right now that's what's happening. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. You'd have to ask your family members about the books if the pharmaceutical companies actually publish those. And if not, that's probably pretty interesting since we're such a prescribing country in the United States. That's what we're being taught is here's what you prescribe.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. Katie, I can see it from the way you describe and how you talk about your mission, but you are completely passionate about what you do. I share with the audience what drives you to tackle both the business and social justice sides of mental health.
It's probably a lot of ignorance, honestly. I mean, like, I love helping people to get the treatment. And I guess it's being told what to do. I've never been one who likes to be told what to do, unless it agreed with my own self, which I think everybody should be that way. I'm so much more, okay, this is how healthcare exists to me. When you come to me and say you come to me, you're like, hey, I need help. I'm like, oh, well, let me tell you what to do because I have an anesthesia and a psychiatry degree and I know the brain really well. That's kind of how in healthcare, we look at you like you're grateful to have us in your life because of all of our specialties and how smart we are. I flip that narrative and say, what are you looking for and what do you need? What do you want? And how can I best support you with my specialties? So instead of me being a leader to your healthcare, you're the one who should be leading your own health. And I will help support that, right? That was one reason I opened the clinic was to walk with people. I don't care who you are. I think everybody deserves to be loved and accepted. What are you looking for and how can I help? So that was the one piece. Probably since I've had the clinic open is when I've started seeing a lot more of the social injustice and I don't know. I mean, like, I think we just give the system way too much credit, right? We think people are smart. Maybe they are, but they're not smart in the business aspect of healthcare or mental health care or whatever else, right? From your payer systems in the United States, I have always been against one payer system, always, until I started working with commercial payers. And the interesting thing, with commercial payers, so if you're talking about Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, all these different aspects, they're all private companies. So why is the federal system telling us we have to have insurance through a private company that's trying to make profit? So, so the more conversations I've had with the business aspect of healthcare, the more I've seen they have no idea what they're talking about. They only know their role. They don't know everyone else's role. They don't have the experience. They don't understand. It's like the right hand doesn't talk to the left hand. Providers hate administrators. Administrators hate providers. The finance team hates everybody, right? It's such a broken system to where I just keep seeing the people that are dying because of it. So I'm boots on the ground. But the nice thing is I understand the science because I'm a provider. I won't say I understand the business necessarily because even though I've been doing it for almost 8 years, I still have a long ways to go. But I understand why the system's imploding on itself. And really, it's the lobbyists. Do I think they should get rid of lobbyists? in the healthcare sector, 100%. Because the only people who are getting the attention and the money are the people who can pay the most to the lobbyists. And you shouldn't have to have a lobbyist who's advocating for healthcare. The person who should win in healthcare, the most effective and the lowest cost. Period. Right? It shouldn't be, oh, well, they paid me $150,000. And I don't know if you've seen some of those arguments recently with some of the politicians that are out there. They're arguing about something right now, maybe the mRNA vaccines. But all the politicians are getting payoffs by big pharma or by pharmaceutical companies. They all are. So we're all dying, and there's this huge crisis because of basically the evil roots of money. And so are there people out there who can't be controlled by money? I think so, but I think they're few and far between. And I think the impact, it's like, okay, so if you get money, great, but then when you die, you're dead, right? It's like, what's the impact that you have? So I think that's my biggest piece with the social injustice is like, I'm so much more on an impact driven than I am from a financial driven piece. Like, do I think people should live great, financially wealthy lives? Sure. Sounds great. But do I think the impact has like 100 times the worth as compared to the financial piece? Yes. My piece doing all of this is trying to learn how not to die. Because there's such a need and everybody wants you to be perfect in so many different sectors. I have hit such rock bottom aspects with my company because God knows how many times I've restructured to keep my company alive because we tried to scale and that didn't work. And we tried to use certain providers and that didn't work. And you try to use certain type of operation systems and those don't work, but you have to pivot and pivot and pivot and pivot. At one time, I think it was in early 2023, it was just so weird. Like, cause I've not like done drugs or had an alcohol issue or anything like that. But I was so mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all of it, exhausted that I felt so close to death. Like it was so weird. It wasn't like suicidal thoughts or anything like that. It was like I was so tired. I didn't know if I could get up. I'm 41 years old. I'm in good shape, right? But I remember walking to my car feeling like I could die at any second. Like that, like ill. It was a really, really odd feeling. And I'm guessing it was just utter exhaustion. And when I felt that, I'm like, what am I doing? And now I actually have a lot more distance between that. Like I don't feel like I could fall over dead tomorrow, which who knows, maybe. But I think that's the big piece is when you become an entrepreneur, especially female, there is a piece of us, right, that has this maternal caring aspect to it that we've got to be very, very careful of, because you can either turn into, I don't care about anybody, right? Which most men that you see in running a business, you just expect that, like, oh, they don't care. Most women, they'll be like, oh, they're too emotional to run a business, right? So you have to find that balance to where it doesn't completely destroy you. And I think feeling that negative energy and how dark some of those things are at those times, I think it helps you to grow. But it's like, you got to sit in the storm for a while and then you get out of it. Right. But then you have empathy for other people. Like, don't do it. But then people tell you that, right? Find a work and life balance that works for you. But there's just so many stages of growth that you have to go through before you can recognize where you've been.
Thank you for sharing. This is really profound. And so when you were in that dark hole and you're like, what did you do? How do you get back up? What were your mechanism, or what have you learned from that episode that some other people who are feeling in the hole, what can be a system?
Honestly, I don't know with those pieces. I mean, I think it's a lot of self-talk. I think it is a big one. It's learning. It's allowing yourself to grieve, right? Because when you start a business, you got all these plans and all these ideas and it's going to work great. And then you don't understand all the different plugs that you're going to have to learn how to deal with. So I think it's learning that this too shall pass. It's learning to stay in the present. I mean, honestly, the people around me, I have a lot of people who watch me. Pretty sure I might be entertaining to some because they're like, is she going to make it or not? But honestly, I've had people around me, like even my ex-husband. Like my ex-husband and I got divorced basically over the company. But he would like bring me food to the house. He's like, you've got to eat. So like him and like I have a friend who's a retired police officer who would call me and say, hey, I noticed a picture of you. You're looking a little too thin. You need to go eat. Can I take you out to eat? And, so it'd be the random people like, hey, are you sleeping? So, but it was kind of like the random drop-ins, I think, from people around me who were checking in on me. That helped a lot. And then honestly, my daughter's 15 now, and it would be her to a point too that would say, Mom, will you just sit and talk for 20 minutes? And then I think that was a big piece, and it shouldn't have been necessarily my daughter bringing this up, but more so as a parent. I think a big thing that we forget, this is to me especially, is not living in the present and thinking that you've got to get it done now. And that was a big, big piece for me is I have, and I still do, right? I have so many things on my plate. Like people would think I was like psychotic if I told them how much stuff I was doing at one time. But I've gotten to the point now, and I don't know if this is because my business is now almost 8 years old and it's still like in a survival stage, right? It will grow, it will get little. It will grow, it will get little. It depends on the economy because it's a cash-based business. It just depends on all kinds of different things that ebb and flow, ebb and flow. The healthiest thing I've learned to do for myself now is to focus as much as I can until I feel like I can't focus anymore. And I know that's something that people can do because if we are focusing on an issue that you have to critically think, and as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, that's all you're doing is critically thinking about, situations like this. So if you're to the point where you're just like, I'm tired and I can't think on an issue that should be done in 15 minutes and you've already tried to do it for an hour, walk away, take a break, go disconnect from yourself. So that was one thing I noticed that helped me a lot too is, and this is my brain, everybody's different. Every 6 to 8 weeks, I need a day or two. And that means even if it's a weekend, right? Because an entrepreneur, you're working all the time. It's like, put your computer down on Friday and pick it up on Monday, at least once every 6 to 8 weeks, right? Don't just walk away. I don't care if you go clean your garage, buy some plants, but pull yourself out of that world. And it's such a reprieve. And I think that was one of my big things is like, I've noticed I've been killing myself for all these things that needed to get done since I've been able to kind of walk away. And I walk away in the evenings now. Like, unless it's like emergency, I don't pick up my computer, right? People know they can text me or whatever. I don't even answer my text messages most of the time unless it's an emergency. I will not pick up my phone anymore. There's so many things that I'm okay with because I'm like, nope, I got to focus on my mental health. I've got to stay healthy. And if you can do that, then you can start kind of sharing, I think, your wealth of yourself a little bit more. But if you don't do that, you will die. The people that you are trying to save or inspire or whatever else, they will kill you over time because you can't, there's not enough of you to go around. So I think that's my biggest thing is like trying to, and I don't do it all the time, but trying to treat myself like like it's a temple, right? Like there's only so much you can give. And if you're just barely giving to as many people as you can, they're all still starving, right? So if you can kind of like focus on the cascading effect and do it a little bit more to where you can instill power in others and then they can actually multiply that, it's so much stronger that way.
But then how, especially as a publicly traded company in this space, then how do you balance the need for growth and investor expectations with the same time navigating patient-centered approach that this medicine requires?
Right. That's an interesting piece, right? That's a really interesting piece because public company investors versus the revenue generating business, very different, right? Very, very different. So your public company investors, especially in Canada, so it's a publicly traded company in Canada. So it's much more in Canada on a right timing, right? So, and this is what a lot of people don't know about Canadian public companies. I didn't know it, right? I've learned all of this. Canadian public companies don't even have to be real companies. And so, but in the States, right, you only become a public company after you have been to be confirmed a genuine real company. Then you can become public. In Canada, it's backwards. So like Revitalist currently is the only surviving public company in the psychedelic sector in Canada. Everyone else has went bankrupt, dissolved, whatever. The other people didn't have a real business. They had a business plan, they had a business idea, and they never could get it to come to fruition. So the difference, right, with the Revitalist piece is Revitalist was a viable company. It was only 3 years old, mind you, when it became public. So, but it was a viable company. So that's why I've been able to kind of shift and restructure and shift and restructure. It's interesting because I'm still trying to figure out the public company aspect of all of this, because it's super expensive to have a public company. And a lot of investors don't always want to put money in where they don't want to put money in, right? So then you have to find investors like for the clinic to help with the public company, and vice versa, find people with the public companies to help with the clinics with scaling. So it's like, if you're not crazy before you do this, you kind of feel crazy once you start doing this, because people will say, no, I need you here. No, I need you here. No, I need you here. And you're constantly like shifting up and down and up and down and up and down. So I think it's learning, what can you do right now at this time that has the highest priority? So I think that, with the public company, I've had so many great people involved with the public company. I've had so many other people involved with a public company that I would not poke with a 45-foot rod. Like, there's a lot of business people out there that I would just prefer not to do business with. But they are also much more experienced than I was. I'm better now, I guess. And again, I'm still learning. But there's a lot of people in business from a private side and from a public side. They're only in it for themselves. And they're not in it for the other investors. They're not in it for the mission. They're not in it to scale. They are in it to make a quick buck overnight. And those are the people, especially in healthcare, you have to worry about, because they are trying to take the most advantage of funds at that time for their own personal benefit, and they don't care about company growth. And I've actually met a lot of people along my journey with that, which is really, really sad and disheartening. They all did great, right? But people who come in who expect to grow the company, and really they just want to get their money back times whatever percent, right? They're using you as a loan, basically. I think that's a really big piece that I would I don't even know if I can warn people, because you don't even know, but like, just to where people can be more aware to be careful when you have people like that come in from a public side or from a private side. This is where you see founders get pushed out. This is where you see CEOs get fired same day. This is where you see the board pushes people out. It's people who aren't in it for the right reason. And it can really destroy a lot of people. If you look at all the public companies that were on the Canadian Securities Exchange, especially with all the ketamine, they left so many people high and dry. And Revitalist was one of them, right? I had 10 locations across 6 states, and I had investors who were like, hey, we're done. You need to start closing clinics like 2 weeks after we opened one. And, and they're just like, we're done. And, and we all try to do the best that we could do. I kept as many clinics open as I possibly could. But when you have people who say, yeah, we're financially backing you, and then they stop like overnight, and that's exactly what happened with those public companies, who knows how many people either died or got mental illness because of the sudden change. And that's like with the public company, I know a lot of people like look at me with a public company and say, oh, she wants to make a lot of money. I want people to be able to invest in something that they firmly believe in, and I want them to have liquidity because of it. That's my ultimate thing. How cool would it be for there to be an actual company that's out there that's leading the efforts to try to solve a global crisis, and you can put your money there. You can also get your money out, right? You don't have to put your money in, and and it doesn't have to be $100,000. It can be $10, right, on the exchange, and you put it in there and you just hope, right? So it's like giving people something to believe in. I think like that's my ultimate goal with the public company, but who knows, right? Do I know the outcome of all of these things yet? No, I wish I did. But that's kind of where I stand, I guess, right now, from public versus private and trying to balance it all. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. It is. I mean, it must be really hard. So my next question is, because you come from the medical space and you have such a big vision and mission, and yet you had to become a business person. So I'm sure there must be sometimes friction between those identities. So how did you navigate that? And also, what would be the advice you're giving to somebody in the medical space who is thinking about starting a business because they want to scale, because they want to help more people?
Yeah, I think, well, my biggest piece, right, would my number one advice would be take a course on QuickBooks, and you be the one who's overseeing all of your finances, all the contracts, right? So there's usually you have CFO and COO and all these things that are doing a lot of these, like with the responsibility. You just trust your team. Always expect that you can trust your team, but also understand like you should be the one checking the banks that day. You should be the one checking QuickBooks. You should be the one who's looking at that, right? Because that's the gas in your tank. That's where I messed up. Because you get so many people, right? They're like, you're a CEO or you're a provider or whatever they want to be. They're like, no, that's what you rely on the finance people for. No, you can rely on them to fix it or do the reports or whatever else, right? Do the amortization or whatever they need, for the financials. But you should be there seeing the intake and the output, because that's where you start picking up on things, on like patterns that you're just like, do we need this? I mean, I've been so overstaffed. Like, when the company was the biggest, my payroll was $260,000 every 2 weeks, and I had people that weren't even working. They were salaried. They weren't even coming into the clinics. But I didn't know that because I was not in the other states where they were. I couldn't watch them, right? But I'd be like, wait a minute, why was there just one appointment? And why do you have 5 full-time staff members? So if you start looking at your books, that would be the biggest thing. So I would say definitely do a quick, you don't have to go back and get your MBA and all this stuff. You'll figure it out along the way. But look at QuickBooks just on the basic things, basic reports, right, that you need. Balance sheet, your profit and loss every month, right? You want to look at those things and you should understand those reports. And I've heard people say that, right? Like, you've got to understand those reports. But then I also hear like, you got to do the protocols or you got to do this. Like, you're told like so many things that you're expected to do. The biggest thing, what is fueling your company, is cash. You've got to know how much cash is in how much fuel's in your tank, right? So that would be my biggest thing. My second biggest thing, I mean, I think, in the outpatient space, I was really unimpressed on how much we actually knew in the hospital as compared to how much they don't know in the outpatient space. So I was scared to death when I came out of the hospital to open the clinic, because I was like, oh no, they're going to do this and this. There's going to be all these things, There's such a lack of oversight with clinics across the country in every state. There's such a lack of oversight. They put fear and intimidation within you, expecting like you can go to prison anytime if you do anything wrong. But they don't tell you what right is. They just expect that right? They expect that FDA and EPA and OSHA and, all these things that you don't know. I mean, like, some things, but you're a provider and they expect you to know all these things. So, one of the best things that I did when I first opened the clinic is I wrote down all the organizations that I could think of. And I looked at their protocols for clinics and I made protocols for those. So like, I'm pretty confident on OSHA and EPA and FDA. Like, I'm confident on those things. I don't know, because the state won't give you. They're just like, we'll do the best you can. If we get a complaint, we'll come and do an investigation. And you're like, but why can't I do it right the first time? And they're like, well, just do the best you can. And that is true. So what I've seen is, and this is probably for providers too, that most providers are just scared, right? Because we're afraid of being sued. We're afraid of hurting people. We're afraid of losing our license. Like, there's so much we're afraid of, but there's so many people out there that need care. So I think, what the state was trying to say is like, do the best you can do. And then if you get reported, we'll come investigate it. As long as you aren't consistently doing something that's breaking the law, if the state comes in and they do an investigation, they're going to find your flaws. Okay, you have flaws, whatever. They're also going to give you critical feedback that you need to change. And they usually give you 30 days or whatever to change it and update it. So I think that's my biggest thing I would tell anybody who wants to get into the medical healthcare space. Do the best you can do. Don't break the law. And when they come, right, and if they do investigate you or whatever, just fix it. But understanding your books is the biggest key. And when I say don't break the law, breaking the law is a negative pattern that's done over and over and over, even after positive correction, right? If you're still doing it, that's breaking the law. Does the law understand that people mess up? Yes. Are there accidents all the time? Yes. That's why you have insurance, right? People mess up all the time. It's practicing medicine. So, don't take money from your company. Don't not pay taxes, right? So when I say breaking the law, it's like, just do the basic things. Pay your employees, pay your taxes. Don't siphon from funds from your company. Have all your bank statements match all your transactions. Understand the basics of QuickBooks. And then that's a very good base to grow off of, is what I would say.
And Katie, right now, looking at the mental health crisis and that we're facing, what do you then see possible in 5 years that most people would find really hard to believe today?
I love to talk about the scale that we created called the Federal Unit Scale. It's 5 questions. I created it because I kept noticing a same recurring pattern with people who had basically 5 questions I'd ask them. And they would say, there was a lot of value on these 5 questions. So I called it the Federal Unit Scale, made it the Federal Unit Scale. And then what we did recently, and it got published in 2025, is we validated that scale. So I work with a group of scientists at Soma Therapeutics. They're beautiful and amazing and some of the smartest people in the world probably. And they validated this scale with almost 12,000 people. So 10,000 of the people were through crowdsourcing. Almost 2,000 was through the clinic. So what the scale did, and this is my impact that hopefully eventually people will either figure out on their own or duplicate or whatever else. What this scale did is the scale showed that there was direct correlation between community and clinical with mental health, meaning that the Federal Unit Scale measures 0 to 100. So you can take it, I can take it, anybody can take it, and it gives you a number. So whatever number it is, right? It doesn't say if you're sick or well, it just gives you a number. So I've been trying to tell people, it's like when you get that number, the goal is that we find the number that we have that we're at our optimal wellness, right? Like it's like, gosh, I'm eating well, sleeping well, I'm going to the gym, I've got great relationships with my friends and my family, my house is clean, so it's like, I'm like, find your number and let that be your number that you strive towards, right? So it could be a 68 or a 92 or a 40. I don't care. What's your number? And I think that's my biggest thing that frustrates me the most is when people say, like with me, they're like, oh, you know why she's in mental health? She's trying to deal with her own issues. No, we all have mental health and it all exists on a spectrum, right? So some people are well and some people are sick. It's not 2 categories. And I think that's my biggest thing in 5 years is like, hey, could we actually do a scale and just show where we're at? What's your mental health? Where do you exist? Where are you today? Right? And to normalize that, because that's my most frustrating piece is people are like, oh yeah, they're mentally ill. No, we all can be mentally ill, right? We all can be physically ill. It's on the same spectrum. So eventually, if we can get to the point to say, hey, we're all at risk. We're all at risk for depression, anxiety, and trauma, and insomnia, and everything else. It's all of us. It's not just the people that aren't doing well right now. So that'd be my biggest thing with mental health is just accepting it as is and not avoiding it. And I think that was something I was talking about the other day. People are so afraid to talk about mental health. It's the number one thing that leads our life every day. Like when we get up and take a shower, or if we eat, or if we put on clothes, it's our mental health. And people are like, oh, don't talk to them. Like they got suicidal thoughts. Don't talk to them. Like you don't know. You're not a professional. Don't talk about that, And I'm just like, guys, like you got to be kidding me. This is ridiculous. So I think that's probably my biggest piece, in the next 5 years. Can we just have a conversation? Can we just talk about it? Like be like, gosh, I didn't sleep good last night. I'm having some dark thoughts. Instead of being like, you better go to the hospital. You better get medicine. It's like, why don't you just talk it through? And let's come up with more effective coping mechanisms to help each other, because most people will say, well, it's life. You'll figure it out. And I'm like, guys, white flag, people aren't figuring it out. They're not working. Disability's huge. Unemployment's huge. They're killing themselves. They're all alcoholics. Like, white flag, like, we got to talk about it. But it's really interesting to me how the world works. I'm trying to stay sane, I think, sometimes in an insane market, but who knows?
It's crazy. Like you're blowing my mind. It's so true how it's such a stigma. Yet this is what we're living every day. Yet it's a taboo. It is crazy.
It's like, do not look at this coffee cup. Don't look at, it's like, no, it's like it's right there. It's like, don't talk about it.
Yeah, it is. That's crazy. And Katie, I mean, you are clearly a badass. You show up as very confident. You're building an empire. You are helping people. Like, you're amazing. I want to understand how people like you are built that way. Did you have family that loved you unconditionally growing up, or did you figure it out for yourself? Like, what make people like you like you?
I love that. Thank you. No. Well, so I had a very strong mom who was very business oriented, basically like, I was always told I was too sensitive by my mom. And so, but there was no whining, right? You just do what's expected of you to do. And if you have the skill set to do it, you do it. So that was kind of my mom, and then honestly, like my brother got killed when I was 14. He was 17. He had a motorcycle accident. It was just overnight. It was my second week in high school. And that was probably where I got a little bit of my social injustice there too, because no one knew how to talk to me. Like everybody was like, and I get it, right? It's hard to talk about. But, I had an English teacher who, because we had to take my brother, he's brain dead. We had to take him off the ventilator. And my English teacher thought it was a great idea. The first week I was back in school, I was only out for 3 days, but the first week I was back in school, she wanted to talk about, is it murder to take somebody off a ventilator? So I've had like incidences in life to where I'm just like, thank God I was able to like bounce up from that and be like, what are you doing? There's so many people in life who do these things. And so now when I see these things, like it's almost like bullies, I guess, to a point, like I'm like, no, move, get out. We're not doing this, And I know that a lot of big corporations, they want to shut people up, right? They want to quiet them down. And I get it, but I'm just not one of those people. Like, and I think that's probably one of my big things is like, life is short. We're all going to die. Make the most out of it. Figure out how you can be an adventure, right? And think about all the training that we've had. We've been trained to go to school, work, create a retirement, retire, then do whatever you want. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because who's to say when I retire that I'm actually enough health to do what I want, right? Who's to say I'm not going to die tomorrow? Like there's so many things to where, and I think that probably happens from loss. If you look at people who lose a close family member, like overnight, they get a little bit more extreme, because they see how quickly life can be taken away. So I think that's probably a little bit of it with me. I also grew up in a very small town to where we had lots of drugs, lots of high school pregnancies, lots of high school dropouts. I'm in a very rural small town in like the Appalachian Mountains, right? So I grew up in a town where you were expected not to be successful. And I did not want to be associated with that. My dad still lives there. My mom passed away a few years ago, but it's good for them. It's not for me. I don't know what it is, but I think it's one of those things like hard work will pay off. You need to be disciplined. You need to be focused. And I am focused, but I get focused on a lot of different topics, which is to my negative. But yeah, I think that's a piece of it, right? Is like, am I trying to prove something? I don't know, maybe. Or do I just feel like there needs to be an advocate out there for people? And that's my biggest thing is like, I've been trained to be an advocate, and that's what I'm doing now. And then when I start talking to people at banks or insurance or whatever else, when I start talking to them, I'm like, I really don't think you're smart. So I really, I'm just like, I think that's what drives me more, because I'm like, you're taking advantage of so many people right now. And they have no idea how to get in touch with you, but this is not making sense to me. So now I'm like, I don't know, like if the Trump administration came up and were like, hey, do you want to help us? I'd be like, yes, let's go. Because like there's so many people out there. I'm just like, you just come to work every day and you just do your 5 check boxes and that's all you do. But yeah, I think that's a piece of it is seeing all the gaps that people don't talk about. And I'm fine to talk about them, as you're aware.
Thank you for sharing so transparently. It's amazing. And so for health tech entrepreneurs who are watching this video and want to tackle big systematic problems, but who are feeling overwhelmed by regulation, stigma, what's your advice for taking that first step?
I think you have to understand the system a little bit. So I think the first step would be to understand, especially with healthcare, right? And especially if you're going to do it in the States, I think the first step is understanding, is it a corporate medicine state or is it a non-corporate medicine state? And seeing what those state rules are. That's the first step. Second step, of course, learning QuickBooks. But then also is learning how to raise money or have enough money, right, to where you have enough stability to make a decision, right? So a lot of people may look and say, oh, yeah, I've got enough money for 6 months or a year or whatever else. Most people will not let you sign a lease for a building, right, for at least 5 to 10 years. Sometimes you can find 1 to 3 years, especially I know New York's kind of weird right now with all their leasing abilities, but you need to be able to bring in enough capital for a rainy day, right? So even to say, okay, if you had no money coming in for 6 months, do you have enough money in the bank to actually help you for those 6 months? So you can have time to make the decisions that you need in order to move forward. So I would say that's the biggest piece, from that standpoint. But yeah, I would start with corporate medicine versus non-corporate medicine states and look at those specifics, because if you don't follow those guidelines, the state can come in and close you the next day. But yeah, that would be my biggest piece. And finding a good lawyer that you trust. It can be a jack of all trades, but just finding a lawyer that you trust who can understand the state statutes from a medical standpoint would be a really good person to have on board.
And Katie, so if you had to do it all over again, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Don't be as trusting. I hate to say, don't be as trusting. Probably I would say trust but verify. Yeah. So that's probably my biggest piece is like, you get a lot of people who come in who give you a lot of different advice, right? And it could be male, mostly male, some female, but people with a lot more experience that you have, right? And it could be in healthcare or government regulation or government relations. It can be with different types of contracts or business operations, whatever, right? And just expect that you're going to learn from them, but none of them are perfect and none of them are able to see what you see. So I think that's my biggest piece is I expect people can see what I see. And one of my flaws is when I tell you about it, I expect you can see it like I see it because I explain things so well, and it's not that way, right? So I think that would be my biggest thing is try to communicate. Try to be the best communicator that you could possibly be, expecting that everyone has your best intentions in mind. But when they mess up, because you're trusting yet verifying, when they mess up, re-communicate it to them in a different way instead of expecting that they either just went against you or didn't understand what you were saying. So I think there's a lot of patience in business, a lot of patience. And that's probably my biggest thing is be patient, yes, but again, the trust and verify. So I think having those like top 3 priorities, if I had top 3 priorities for my business today, I would say your bank statements, like looking at your bank account every day, checking QuickBooks every day, looking at your accounts, and marketing. Those are your 3 biggest things from a business standpoint. Now, from a provider standpoint, I would say quality care, making sure that your providers are healthy and making sure that the clinics are in the conditions that they need to be in, right? So, I mean, because, things happen, right? There can be, there can be a chair that breaks or something, right? And you just don't get told about it. So just like doing those check-ins, right? So running the clinics is quality. Running the business is that oversight. And so it's like, do not trust your marketing people. I've worked with so many marketing people and they've told me so many things. They're great with sales. But they don't meet their goals typically. And they'll say, I know what I'm doing with ketamine. No, you don't. Because here's the thing, no one knows what they're doing with ketamine from a marketing standpoint. There's like 158 pages of Medicare marketing that you have to understand to do healthcare marketing, ketamine marketing, Google Analytics, something called legit scripts, like social media. It's like, how do you hold your mouth right so they don't block you, because it's scheduled drugs, right, that you're dealing with as well. And then it's also mental health. Don't say suicide. So it's like when people are like, oh, I know what I'm doing. But yeah, they're like, oh yeah, I've been doing marketing for years and I can take this over. They can't. So that's the piece. It's like, you've got to trust but verify. Can they start somewhere and can they grow? Absolutely. But I've had so many people come in and just say exactly what they're going to do and they don't do it, right? So it's like low expectations, better results, right? And a lot of people will give you these huge things that they're going to do. And that was the frustrating thing with me, is coming back and being like, is there the weekly newsletter that you said that we were going to do? I've not seen it come out in 2 weeks. Where's the newsletter? Oh yeah, I've been busy. Sorry. And it's like, why am I the one coming back to make sure you are doing what you signed up to do? So again, that's that trust versus verify things. But in front of you, just to not have too much on your plate. I'm not there. I have way too much on my plate still. I'm doing the best that I can do, but I know that that's still a flaw, and it's just learning. It's every day. It's learning and repackaging, to see what makes the most sense.
Thank you so much, Katie. It was such a great episode, and you were so generous with your insights and sharing your story. What a pleasure.
Well, I love what you're doing, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
And Katie, where can people find you?
So they can actually email me. It's Kathryn Walker at Revitalist.com is my personal email with the company. Or they can go to Revitalist.com. We have our online shops with all of our supplements and things like that too, but that can all be found at Revitalist. parlez-vous.com. And then I have accepted that I'm trying to be more of an influencer. So on your social media platforms, there's going to be a lot more of that as well. Because like I was telling somebody the other day, I'm like, we should make mental health fun. This shouldn't be like a doom and gloom topic. So I'm going to try to start making mental health fun. I'm sure it's going to be somewhat controversial for a while, but it's getting it out there to where people feel safe enough to talk about it.
That's amazing. I love your mission. Thank you again, Katie. And thanks for being here on Parlez-Vous CEO and sharing your story. And that wraps up today's episode. I am Anne-Lise Cailliez, and I can't wait to join you again next week. Thanks for listening to Parlez-Vous CEO today. If you enjoyed the show, leave a 5-star review. It helps us keep going. And connect with us on Instagram at Parlez-Vous CEO. I am Anne-Lise Cailliez, and I know some days are harder than others. On those tough days, think back to why you started. What you're doing today matters, even when you can't see the results yet. Ideas are great, but it's what you do with them that counts. Find everything we talked about today at parlezvousceo.com. See you next week, and you've got this.